Dr. Mary Schneider.
Really prepared for that. Thank you, John. Louis Veda, who was our presenter this morning, first became interested in this topic when he was preparing for a conducting recital and was preparing and performing pieces by these two composers. So I'm delighted that he made this connection. Louis will be graduating next month with his music education degree, and we're very interested in hearing the research that he's done on this topic. Louis Veda.
Are we on? All right. Well, good morning. Thank you for being here this morning. Again, my name is Louis Veda. I am studying music education here at Eastern. And this last December, as Dr. Schneider mentioned, I prepared and we performed a conducting recital that included works of Aaron Copland, Charles Gounod, and Karel Husa. So when I was looking for an honors project for my departmental honors, I was trying to make some kind of connection to my recital. And I thought, well, Aaron Copland and Karel Husa had a shared teacher, which was totally unbeknownst to me before I started preparing for this recital. So I started to dig a little bit deeper, and one thing led to another, and now I have this 60-page thesis paper that's out for signatures right now. So today is going to be a very, very, very abridged overview of my findings, and it will hopefully serve as a survey of 20th century American music through the study of compositions of Aaron Copland and Karel Husa. So let's start at the very beginning with their teacher. Nadia Boulanger was a pianist and organist who worked in Paris. She was born into a relatively affluent family that was very well connected. Her grandfather taught cello at the Paris Conservatory, so her family was one that received visits from composers like Charles Gounod and Gabriel Fauré. So she grew up in a very musical household with a lot of early influence. So she began teaching music. Her younger sister Lily was actually one of her first students, and decided that she really loved teaching music, and she enrolled in the Paris Conservatory at the age of 9, which is very young to enroll in the Paris Conservatory, and as soon as she graduated, began teaching harmony, counterpoint, composition, and organ performance at the American Academy and the École Normale. Both of these academies were designed to provide similar instruction to the Paris Conservatory to students from outside of France. At the time, the Paris Conservatory remained almost entirely closed to foreign students. So her position at these two academies, which were really the two premier institutions in Paris at the time, ensured that she was seeing some of the best students from around the world come through her studio. She also taught composition and piano lessons out of her apartment. That was this 36 Rue Ballou. It was a salon-style class where composers from around the world would join her on Wednesday afternoons, and they could have their works critiqued, performed, they could listen to new things, and talk about music. Nadia Boulanger was also a stickler for the fundamentals of composition. This quote serves to show you a little bit of what she was like as a person. She was viewed as a very strict Catholic and very, very strict teacher. But she viewed this as important because for her students, she wanted them to have complete technical mastery over their craft, because she thought that that would free them to write what they're hearing in their inner ear. She was also passed on to her students the concept of la grande ligne, or the grand line, which it translates to in English, which is this idea that you should always be aware of how one note leads to the next and how one phrase leads to the next. And for a composer and a teacher of composition in Paris in the 1920s, this wasn't terribly common, because you had a lot of teachers and composers there who were writing music using formulas or writing serial music. And as the 20th century went on, those practices became more popular, and you see composers writing with chance operations. So the idea that she was always teaching her students, how does this phrase lead to the next one? Does this note belong in this phrase? Was unique, and it was something that she passed on to her students, and it's very evident in the music of Karel Husa and Aaron Copland. So one of her students, Aaron Copland, was born in Brooklyn, New York. He traveled to Paris in 1921 and became a member of what we refer to as the Lost Generation now. This group of people, if you've ever seen the movie Midnight in Paris, it's that bookstore, Shakespeare and Company, included writers like Ernest Hemingway. And they studied in Paris during this interwar period and tried to make sense and reason out of a time marked by great violence. This was the period between World War I and World War II. Aaron Copland became a member of this party when he was studying in Paris. He was also introduced to Nadia Boulanger after his first year studying there. She accepted him into her studio, and the two of them formed a relationship that would last both of the rest of their careers. She introduced him to many influential composers, and the director at the time of the Paris Opera, Serge Kutzkevsky, who the next year was appointed as the director of the Boston Symphony Orchestra and became a major supporter of Aaron Copland's works in the United States. He actually commissioned his very first American premiere, the Organ Symphony for Orchestra. So that was what he performed with the Boston Symphony Orchestra and the New York Symphony Orchestra, and Nadia Boulanger traveled with them to the United States and performed the organ part. When Aaron Copland returned to the United States, he attempted to blend his more modernist and neoclassical ideas that he had gotten in Paris with a more populist or popular style of composition. This resulted in the style that we now refer to as Americana. He made it one of his major career goals to find that American style of music. He was always very interested in how the United States fit into the global political scene. He was very interested in global politics his entire life. And so finding that folk influence and that jazz influence that he could infuse his training from Paris with really helped Aaron Copland to discover what would become the American style of music. So I can show you a little bit here of what I mean. Aaron Copland's style is best characterized by lots of open intervals and parallel movement of triadic harmony, which is why a lot of people refer to Aaron Copland's music as sounding like cowboy music, which I think is pretty accurate in a lot of ways. His music tried to depict the landscape and the scenery of the American West, and especially during the time of his fanfare for the common man, also when he published the ballet Appalachian Spring, Billy the Kid, and his Rodeo. You see a lot of this realism influence in his music. So you'll hear a little bit of this. This is a clip from my recital in December. All of these musicians are from EMU, and they're wonderful. So that's a little taste of that. And then something else that we talk about a lot with the music of Aaron Copland is very slow-moving harmony. So one of the best examples of this is the opening of his ballet Appalachian Spring. This was done as a collaboration with the famous choreographer Martha Graham that won him a Pulitzer Prize in 1943. So at the beginning here, you'll hear we're just outlining this A major triad. We have the 7th there and the 9th. the harmony doesn't change for the first 10 measures of this piece. It's just A major over and over again. And it's revoiced, and it's... And then we finally get to measure 11 here, and for a second it sounds like we're going into D major. And then we're back to A again. And then it's back to D. And then back to A. So the music of Aaron Copland isn't harmonically complex from this era. He's taking this very popular style of composition that was very accessible to the otherwise uneducated, unacademic American concert audience. And he made education a large goal of his career, education of concert audiences. So we're going to skip ahead about 40 years here and talk a little bit about one of his contemporaries, Karel Husa. This was another student of Nadia Boulanger. Karel Husa was born in Prague, Czechoslovakia, during a very politically uneasy time to be living in Prague, Czechoslovakia. He enrolled in technical school with hopes to become an engineer when he was an adult. And then the Nazi party, which was controlling Prague, shut down all of the technical schools. So it was advised by his violin teacher that he enroll in the Prague Conservatory to study composition. He wasn't a very talented composer. This is coming from his composition professor. He wasn't a very talented composer, but he had a good ear. So he thought, well, if I'm not going to get drafted, yes, I will enroll in composition. He quickly developed a love for music and for composition, and his background as an engineer drove him to try to find new ways, to find new colors. So one of the early 20th century eras of music, the Expressionist Movement and the Modernist Movement, both really resonated with Karel Husa. When he began studying in Paris, when he was getting his PhD, he really resonated with those eras and he started to study them. And when he was living in Prague, he wasn't able to compose music that sounded modern, especially under the Nazi regime. They were very strict that all art should sound like Richard Strauss. So when he was in Paris, all of a sudden he was free to experiment with new colors and new sounds. And when he was accepted as a student of Nadia Boulanger, he became one of her favorite students. A few years later, he was requested multiple times by the Prague Republic that he remain in Prague and do a residency with Prague Philharmonic. He denied this for two reasons. He wanted to finish his studies that he started in Paris. He felt that as a musician in Europe, he would have a lot of doors closed to him if he didn't have one of those French music degrees, which was true at the time. The other reason was the Soviet Union at the time was rising to power in Czechoslovakia, and he feared that if he returned home, he wouldn't be able to go back to Paris and finish his studies. So he forfeited his Czech citizenship, and Nadia Boulanger helped Karel Husa to extend his visa, and then wrote him a letter of recommendation to begin teaching at Cornell University in the United States, which is how Karel Husa winds up in the US. When he's in the United States, he's introduced to the wind ensemble, which is a smaller form of concert band with flexible instrumentation, which was very appealing to Karel Husa because he was always interested in experimenting with new colors. So this ensemble where you could write for 3 oboes or 2 English horns and not write for trombone if you didn't feel like writing for that color was very appealing to him. And some of his early works were very successful. His music for Prague, 1968, was written about the Prague Spring reform movement. His Apotheosis of This Earth was written, which coincided with the premiere of the environmental movement, which started in 1970. And he also used his music as a vehicle to talk about global political things that were going on at the time. This is just one more thing here about Karel Husa before we move on. He would combine his love for folk material, which was inspired by his background in the Czech Republic, with this more modernist neoclassical compositional style. So you have C major against F sharp here in the very beginning. And you're going to hear this in an excerpt because I'm an awful pianist and I'm not going to play it for you. All right, and unfortunately there's not enough time to get to the rest of this, but if any of you are interested in learning more about this, I have this 60-page document that's just sitting on my desk that would love somebody to read it. We don't have any time for questions today, but I would love to follow up with any more information. This is my email here. I hope that this is something that you feel was beneficial. Thank you for being here this morning, and thank you for your support of undergraduate research here at EMU.